Hi there, everybody. Welcome to our open book. Very good to be with you. I'm going to open a new book tonight, which I hope we can have the author on, S.R. O'Brien, also Elise, Catherine Capel, Mark Gladstone, Nancy Jo Weinstein, Darlene, Molly Karras. Blessed are the Cheesemakers. I haven't seen them before. Ralph Rice. Um, Quite a title, Cocked and Boozy, An Intoxicating History of the American Revolution. Brooke Barbieri uh, received her PhD in American History from Boston College in 2013. She's the founder of the Old Tavern Tour. It's a popular outing that gave guests into historic sites and taverns to learn about Boston's revolutionary and drunken history. Now, let me begin. It's just going to be a short section tonight. This is something that's important to note because it's not just played for laughs. As Professor Barbieri, Dr. Barbieri notes, long ago, alcohol abuse was ubiquitous to the war experience for civilians and soldiers of both sides, but it hurt the invading army's efforts more than those of the homegrown one. Over the course of 8 years, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Newport, and Charleston, South Carolina, among other towns, would be occupied by British soldiers. When entering a new city, the Redcoats pillaged the nearby countryside, got drunk, destroyed private homes, and were publicly and violently punished by superiors, which repulsed many civilians. The officers could not see it in real time, but it was clear when looking back. The dissipation of the British troops ruined their chance to maintain and increase critical support for their side. So that's something interesting to remember. Drink did not help them.
Does drink ever help?
Well, but here's a. I'm going to read briefly because I don't want to read. I really want Dr. Barbier to come on here. But she writes, long before the American Revolution began, Benjamin Franklin learned a valuable lesson. Wine could get him what he wanted.
Well, he'd been in France.
When he was a young man, he needed cannons to protect Philadelphia and asked the governor of New York, George Clinton, for munitions. I never knew this story. Clinton refused, but at a dinner with his council where there was great drinking of Madeira wine, Franklin explained, he softened by degrees and said he would lend us 6. From 0 to 6 cannon and a few glasses. Rarely is something like this so explicitly stated. But here, Franklin acknowledged that alcohol had indeed allowed him to access previously grudging help. Franklin was savvy enough to keep the wine flowing. As it did, so did the size of the gift. Quote, after a few more bumpers, he advanced it to 10, and at length he very good-naturedly conceded 18. Pennsylvania went from having no cannons to 6, then 10, and finally 18. While in France in 1776, Franklin hoped their leaders would be even more generous than Governor Clinton had been. He means, of course, with munitions, not wine, but maybe that too. Congress recognized that entertaining would be important when it assigned Franklin the job of commissioner. He and Arthur Lee, the other diplomat, quote, should live in such a style and a manner at the court of France as they may find suitable and necessary to support the dignity of the public character. Does that just mean kick back and have a good time? And
I mean, he did go to the court. He wasn't. I was just listening to this. In fact, that's one of the things, but it's in French on Radio France Culture. There's a wonderful podcast about Benjamin Franklin during his time in Paris. He wasn't.
He did go to the court,
yes,
right?
But
he would wear like buckskin.
Yes, exactly. He was quite. Yes.
But as an act, I mean,
yes, as an act, exactly.
To say we're your,
yes,
cousins or something. Franklin wasted no time, hiring a French cook and stocking his cellar with over 1,000 bottles of wine. He had developed a love of the drink while in Europe and wrote in French to a friend, "Behold the rain which descends from heaven upon your vineyards. There it enters the roots of the vines to be changed into wine, a constant proof that God loves us and loves to see us happy." Similar phrase is attributed to Franklin today. Beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. But that's something he did not say, according to Dr. Barbier. He hosted meetings at his home and was also present at the court at Versailles, making the case that the enemy of France's enemy was its friend. The French were charmed by Franklin, but there was a downside to all of his drinking and entertaining over the years: poor health. Did you know this? Or you just listening to the podcast? The older Franklin seemed to have forgotten his younger self's advice: be temperate in wine, in eating, and sloth, or the gout will seize you. Gout seized him while in Europe, a condition that typically afflicted the wealthy because they could afford the rich foods that could trigger it, and consuming excessive alcohol exacerbated it. John Hancock and Thomas Jefferson also suffered from gout, which made some days incredibly painful and difficult. I didn't know. This is fascinating. I mean, we saw like a plaque up for in Paris, right, for where Franklin lived. Didn't mention the gout.
No.
It became such an all-consuming affliction that Benjamin Franklin imagined a conversation between himself and gout, as personified by a woman. He asked her what he had done to deserve such pain. Madame Gout bluntly replied, "You have ate and drank too freely." And she blamed him for his insuperable love of ease. Franklin had been told to lay off meat and cheese in France, but admitted, much as modern American visitor to France might, "I ate a hearty supper, much cheese, and drank a good deal of champagne." His entertaining may have hurt his body, but it paid off. France decided to send military help to the United States in 1778. Franklin's charisma and wine cellar were vital. But there had been another impetus for France to join the fight. The Continental Army had a massive victory in Saratoga, New York in the fall of 1777. After France felt more confident that the United States might actually win the war, and they agreed to send their army and navy to finish off Britain, Spain would enter the following year as France's ally. Did you know that?
No.
How did we miss this? Going forward, Britain would need to protect their colonies in both North America and the West Indies against the formidable French navy. The sugar and rum islands were worth far more than anything on the mainland. So it was not an option to leave them undefended, which would strain their already limited resources. The British loss in Saratoga was blamed on their ambitious General John Burgoyne, who had, less than a year earlier, placed a bet in London that he would return home victorious after Christmas, with an outcome as shocking as this one. Burgoyne's reputation as a gambler and drinker hindered any defense that he could offer for the rout. We know that labeling a person drunk was sometimes an implicit way to discredit them or make them seem powerless over themselves. The Baroness Friederike von Eidezel, the wife of a Hessian officer, made such an accusation against Burgoyne. She had accompanied her husband to North America and was in Saratoga during the defeat. Von Eidezel said to Burgoyne, "Like having a jolly time and spending half the night singing and drinking and amusing himself in the company of the wife of the commissary, who was his mistress and, like him, loved champagne." The Baroness was no teetotaler. She had been without water at the time and recalled, "I was often obliged to quench my thirst with wine. Even had to give the children some." Drinking was okay. It was Burgoyne's excessive alcohol consumption that she found fault with. By pointing out his constant partying, von Riedesel was saying something about Burgoyne that was different than occasionally immoderate drinking. He was saying that he was distracted, frivolous, and not in control. The loss in Saratoga led to the resignation of the Howe brothers, who would go out with a blowout party. In Philadelphia, a town they had occupied for 9 months, it was a tradition to host a gathering for departing generals. But the meschianza, which he says is a kind of an amalgamation of the Italian word for medley, was one of the most wasteful North America had ever seen. Parade along the Delaware River began around 4 in the afternoon as onlookers perched from balconies in the tops of boat houses. Boats decorated with colors and streamers were filled with British and Hessian officers and the ladies who accompanied them, while other vessels carried musicians playing songs, including God Save the King. As the procession reached the dock, a warship gave a 17-gun salute. On land, a pavilion hosted various entertainments, including a mock medieval jousting tournament. There was a reception with cooling liquors. Around 9 o'clock, fireworks were shot off. The banquet room had an appearance of enchantment. Toasts were drunk. Very loud acclamations followed those for the Howes brothers. The party offered another example of the way soldiers' excesses, especially as they related to alcohol, estranged civilians. It was impossible for Philadelphians to ignore the massive party for British officers who, despite not significantly advancing the war effort nor increasing sympathy for their cause, were going out with a sense of triumph. I'll go on just a little. Franklin had wined and dined the denizens of Paris and Versailles, and such entertaining was now needed from those stateside to ensure the alliance was kept strong. The first assignments for the French in North America was to help in Newport, Rhode Island, which had been occupied by the British Army since 1776. The campaign did not go smoothly. After a hurricane blew through, the Comité d'Estaing, Jean-Baptiste Charles Henri Hector,
I'm not sure.
commander for the French Navy, retreated to Boston to have his ships repaired, leaving thousands of New England soldiers to fend for themselves in Rhode Island. That immediately hurt the reputation of the French, who were already unwelcome in Massachusetts. Many in the state were hostile toward the European country. This was not that long after the French and Indian War, after all. Further, the majority of the people in Massachusetts were Protestants, deeply suspicious of Catholicism. Paul Revere was half French. His father had immigrated from the European country, and he was wary of the alliance too, conceding, "I was as much as prejudiced against them." John Hancock stepped in as he and his wife kept an open house for officers and sailors. The servants scrambled to adapt. The Marquis de Lafayette, who dined at Hancock's mansion on several occasions, admitted that Hancock did much to distinguish himself by his zeal in hosting. And when Bostonians saw how Hancock treated those new allies, they, I hope, will do the same. The visit was capped off by an expensive grand ball. Such a conspicuous display was criticized by some, but drinking together was seen as essential to the alliance because sharing alcohol builds trust, something that the partnership greatly needs. This was explicitly said by one Frenchman to the most influential man in America, the Marquis de Chastellux. Chastellux?
I'm not sure, Sophie.
Well, was Washington's translator and sent him some claret?
Claret, yeah.
Claret. He knew the general might be reluctant to accept it, so he claimed that if the gift was rejected, Chastellux would have little choice but to believe you are an enemy to French produce and have a little of the Tory in your composition. The general knew this gift was more than simply wine. It represented the offering of a friendship. If it was declined, it would be seen as a repudiation of the person and possibly an entire nation. So Washington accepted the wine because, quote, a refusal would bring my patriotism into question and to incur a suspicion of want of attachment to the French nation. He had to drink the wine to show the French his appreciation and commitment to the alliance. The general's one scruple was that if Chastellux shared the wine with him, he might not have enough for himself. They both knew the good that came from wine, so Washington made him, quote, promise to partake very often in that hilarity which a glass of good claret seldom fails to produce. Hilarity, she notes, is not a word anyone would readily associate with Washington. It was usually seen as stiff and reserved. But wine could work wonders. So this is a fascinating book. I hope we can have Brooke Barbier on. Whoops. Sorry. There, got that photograph better. So thanks very much for being with us on our open book tonight. Tomorrow night, I will be doing a promo for our show, which will be on July 4th. So we have a lot.
Yes, that's wonderful.
It's planned. And we interviewed an author today who is going to be joining us. We've got some dates to look at her for open book next week. So
You've had a very busy week.
Yeah. So thanks for being with us on our open book tonight. See you later. Take care. Bye-bye.